The 8:15 morning express from London to Edinburgh was known for many things: its punctuality, its polished brass fixtures, and the quiet elegance of the passengers who favoured its first-class carriages. But above all, it was known for one gentleman, Mr. Lionel Hartcombe, the man who had never once missed this train in 23 consecutive years. Regardless of weather, scandal, or circumstance, Mr. Hartcombe was always seen walking down Platform 3 at precisely 8:05, adjusting the cuffs of his immaculate grey suit and giving a courteous nod to the station master. He was, in many ways, a fixture of the station itself. And so, on a damp Tuesday morning in late October, when Mr. Hartcombe did not appear at 8:05, nor at 8:06, nor even at the final call for boarding, a quiet unease fell upon Wellingford Station. The porters exchanged puzzled glances. A ticket inspector walked twice around the platform, as though the man might have materialized somewhere he ordinarily ought to be. Miss Clara Wimbley, the young journalist who often shared the carriage with Hartcombe, stared anxiously at the station clock. It was unimaginable. The gentleman who never missed a train had, impossibly, missed a train. The express pulled away without him. At 8:22 the unease thickened into murmurs when Mr. Hartcombe's personal valet, a pale and trembling man named Rowan Pierce, arrived running, hat askew, breathing in frantic, uneven bursts. "He's gone," the valet blurted, stumbling against the ticket booth. "Mr. Hartcombe, he is not in his room, sir. He is nowhere. His bed unslept in, his watch left behind, his schedule undone." The station master, a broad-shouldered man of calm disposition, asked carefully, "Are you saying Mr. Hartcombe has disappeared?" The valet nodded, his face drained of all colour. "Sir, Mr. Hartcombe has not left his room since last evening, at least not by any door I could see." The words, fragile as frost, lingered in the cold air. And then, as if woven together by invisible threads of dread, the morning's tension snapped into full alarm when a porter, returning from an unusually long errand, emerged from the far end of the platform, trembling as violently as the valet. "In the goods shed," he whispered. "Behind the crates. Someone must come. Quick." There, inside the dim, dusty enclosure, smelling of rope and machine oil, lay the body of Mr. Lionel Hartcombe, impeccably dressed, his silver hair smoothed back, his expression strangely peaceful, save for the thin line of crimson at his temple. Dead. Murdered. And the most baffling thing of all, a neatly punched, unused first-class ticket for the 8:15 express rested in his gloved hand. The police were summoned. Statements were taken, yet even the most methodical inspector could not answer the one question murmured across the station by all who had known the man. Why would Lionel Hartcombe, who never missed a train, come to the station, hours early, only to die in the goods shed? It was Miss Clara Wimbley who gave voice to the next question, spoken in a trembling whisper to the station master. "This is a locked circle situation, isn't it? A murder committed sometime between last night and early dawn." Her eyes widened. But if there were no signs of struggle, no broken glass, no footprints in the damp, and no reports of entry or exit, then how could the killer have fled? No answer came. And so, by mid-afternoon, with rumours spiralling out of control and the local constabulary no closer to clarity, the station master did the only prudent thing a man in his position could do. He telephoned Hercule Poirot. Poirot arrived at Wellingford Station just as the lamplighters began their slow march along the platforms. The evening fog curled around him like a curious cat as he stepped down from the train with his small valise, adjusting the cuffs of his immaculate coat. His eyes, sharp as polished jet, surveyed the station with immediate and intense interest. "Messieurs, mesdames," he greeted, bringing a gloved hand to his hat brim. "I understand there has been a most unusual disturbance in the admirable punctuality of your 8:15 express." Inspector Garrow, a large-boned man with a permanent look of irritation, frowned at him. This is a murder investigation, Poirot, not a matter of railway scheduling. Poirot clicked his tongue softly. But nature of crime, Inspector, can often be read in small irregularities. A life, like a train, runs on a schedule of habits and routines. When such a life stops, unexpectedly, it is always a matter of interest. He was ushered to the goods shed. Poirot paused in the doorway, surveying the body with a contemplative tilt of his head. He noted the position of the hands, the angle of the wound, the curious lack of dust on Hartcombe's shoes, the faint trace of perfume not belonging to the dead man, and the pristine condition of the unused train ticket. His lips pursed. Curious. Very curious. "And what of the suspects?" he asked softly. Inspector Garrow sighed. A station full of them, staff, passengers, the valet, acquaintances, though none with any clear motive. Poirot's eyes twinkled. But everyone has a motive, Inspector. It is only a matter of discovering the correct one." He bent closer to the body. "And here," he murmured, "we have a gentleman who never missed a train. Yet today, he missed everything." He stood up abruptly. "Summon everyone who saw Mr. Hartcombe last evening or this morning," he commanded gently. "For we begin the little investigation." Poirot straightened his tie, tapped the tip of his cane, and added with quiet finality, "The timetable of murder must be examined with precision." The waiting room beside Platform 3 had been hastily transformed into an impromptu assembly hall. The station staff, accustomed to orderly timetables and predictable routines, found themselves uncomfortably crowded together with a collection of anxious passengers, each one glancing restlessly toward the door as though hoping for escape. Hercule Poirot, however, required no such escape. He entered the room with his usual composed dignity, surveying the assembled group as though they were pieces arranged on some grand and intricate chessboard. Inspector Garrow cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Poirot will be taking statements. Nobody is to leave until dismissed. Your cooperation is expected." Poirot stepped forward, his hands clasped lightly behind his back. "Mesdames et messieurs, we seek only the truth. A man has died, a man of punctual habits, a man who lived his life according to the most precise of schedules. When such a man meets an untimely end, it is not by accident, it is by design." Several heads lowered, a few eyes darted nervously about, and thus began the introductions. First was Miss Clara Wimbley, the young journalist whose fingers now tightened around a leather-bound notebook. Her brown hair framed a face both eager and troubled. I knew Mr. Hartcombe only in passing," she stammered. "Our conversations were brief, polite. He was punctual, formal, and rather private. I cannot imagine who would wish him harm." Poirot noted the tremor in her voice, the way she clutched her notebook not merely as an accessory, but as a shield. "And yet, mademoiselle, you are distressed," he observed gently. "Anyone would be," she replied quickly, "to find he's been murdered, at the station of all places." "But you," Poirot murmured, "are not just anyone." Her cheeks flushed, though she said nothing further. Next came Rowan Pierce, the valet, who wrung his hands incessantly. "I've served Mr. Hartcombe 11 years, he said, his voice thin. "He was particular in his habits, very particular, everything in its place, every appointment kept precisely. That he should be found here, in such a state—" He trailed off, unable to continue. Poirot regarded him keenly. "Did he have enemies, Monsieur Pierce?" "Not that I knew, though—" The valet's gaze flickered toward a man standing near the refreshments table. "He had disagreements." The man in question straightened at once when addressed. Captain Henry Malden, retired officer, broad-shouldered, jaw set at a stern angle. His military posture made him stand out sharply among the civilian crowd. "Yes," he said crisply, "I had disagreements with Hartcombe. Professional, nothing more." "Professional?" Poirot echoed. "You served together." "In a sense, I advised a firm in which Hartcombe was a major shareholder. He disagreed with my recommendations. Tempers rose. But I assure you, I had no reason to kill him. Poirot watched the captain's jaw clench ever so slightly. It was a controlled clench, one belonging to a man accustomed to hiding much, behind a hardened exterior. Beside the captain stood a woman of striking poise and elegance, Mrs. Eloise Kent, dressed in a deep burgundy coat and wearing a scent that Poirot instantly recognized as the same faint perfume detected in the goods shed. She held her handbag with a grip that betrayed tension beneath her polished exterior. "I hardly knew Lionel," she said coolly. "I saw him occasionally on the 8:15. Nothing more." "Yet your perfume, madame," Poirot said with a polite bow, "is one I encountered earlier today." Her fingers stiffened. "Perhaps someone else wears it," she suggested. "Perhaps," Poirot replied, offering no argument. She glanced away too swiftly. Not far from her leaned a man with ink-stained fingertips and spectacles perched crookedly on his nose. Mr. Tobias Ainsworth, a railway timetable analyst. His energy was nervous, his posture restless. "I've studied Mr. Hartcombe's travel patterns for years," he blurted. "For an article, you understand. His punctuality was exemplary, astonishing even. His absence this morning was statistically singular, absolutely singular." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You follow the habits of commuters so closely?" Ainsworth adjusted his glasses. "Patterns reveal character, Monsieur Poirot, and character reveals motive." Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps we shall rely on that insight." A quiet figure stood apart from the others. Mrs. Agnes Whitlow, a widowed seamstress who sold small handmade items at the station kiosk. She wrung a floral handkerchief as she spoke. "Mr. Hartcombe, he always greeted me kindly. Always bought a lavender sachet from my stall every Tuesday. Said it reminded him of someone long ago." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I cannot fathom who would harm him." Poirot stepped closer. "You knew him longer than most here, madame. Did he confide in you?" "Only kindnesses," she whispered. "Only memories." Two more remained, a young porter named Edwin Marsh, slight and pale, and a telegraph clerk, Douglas Fry, a bespectacled man with an air of quiet intelligence. Marsh swallowed nervously. I found the body, sir. When I saw him lying there, I near fainted. I swear I saw no one else. The shed was empty." "And yet," Poirot murmured, "a man does not die alone from such an injury. Someone must have led him there, or followed." The porter nodded miserably. Douglas Fry stepped forward next. "I saw Hartcombe last evening," he said. "He posted a letter. Urgent," he said. Odd, because he normally posted things at his residence. When he left, he looked troubled. Poirot leaned forward slightly. "Troubled? In what manner?" As though he had discovered something he did not like. A ripple of tension passed among the assembled group. Poirot looked at them all, the journalist, the valet, the captain, the elegant woman, the analyst, the seamstress, the porter, the telegraph clerk, a closed circle indeed, a group with connections woven by routine, coincidence, and hidden ties. Inspector Garrow muttered, "A strange lot." Poirot lifted a finger. "Not strange, Inspector. Merely human, every one of them capable of reason and also capable of folly." His gaze swept the room one final time. "In this station," he said softly, "every timetable intersects, and somewhere among you is the one whose schedule included murder." The waiting room gradually emptied as Inspector Garrow dismissed the group in small clusters, allowing them to return to their quarters under watchful supervision. Only Poirot lingered, observing as each suspect departed. The stiff shoulders of Captain Maldon, the hurried steps of Miss Wimbley, the elegantly controlled poise of Mrs. Kent, the nervous twitch of Mr. Ainsworth, the trembling hands of the porter, the worried glance of the telegraph clerk, and the quiet sorrow of Mrs. Whitlow. Every gesture, every look, every hesitation. Poirot filed them neatly into the drawers of his mind. When the last suspect had been escorted away, Poirot turned to Inspector Garrow, who rubbed his forehead with evident exhaustion. "This is madness," Garrow muttered. 8 people, no weapon, no witnesses, and a victim who by all accounts led the dullest, most orderly life in England. Poirot tapped a finger against his chin. Orderly, yes. Dull? Perhaps not. He moved toward the door, motioning for Garrow to follow. "Come, Inspector. Let us examine the scene again. A fresh pair of eyes sees much." The 2 men crossed the platform as dusk deepened into a thick, bluish fog that clung to the iron rails. Oil lamps glowed faintly, leaving the far ends of the station cloaked in murk. The goods shed loomed like a shadowed sentinel. Inside, a constable stood guard beside the body. Poirot knelt gracefully, studying Hartcombe's face with an expression that was neither mournful nor detached, but deeply thoughtful. "A peaceful expression for one who met violence," he murmured. "This tells us something." "Such as what?" Garrow asked. "That our victim was not taken by surprise. He knew the one who struck him." Garrow frowned. "He was hit from behind." Poirot nodded. "Just so. But he did not sense danger. He felt safe, or at least unsuspecting." He pointed at Hartcombe's gloved hand. "You see how he still holds the ticket? It was not snatched, crumpled, or dropped. He clung to it." "Why does that matter?" "It indicates purpose." Poirot stood. He intended to travel. He came here for the train even at this unusual hour. Someone compelled him. Garrow scratched his chin. "But he didn't get on the train." "No," Poirot said softly, "because he never had the chance." Poirot stepped back, scanning the shed from corner to corner. The crates, neatly stacked, bore faint scuff marks. The floor was dusty except for narrowed footprints, likely from the porter who discovered the body, and a faint disturbance behind a stack of smaller boxes near the wall. "This crate," Poirot said, pointing at a medium-sized box that seemed out of alignment with the rest, "has been moved." Garrow knelt beside it. "Recently?" Poirot crouched as well, touching the floor with his gloved fingers. "Very recently. And look, the dust beneath it is less settled. Someone hid something here, or retrieved something." Garrow motioned to the constable. "Search the area." As the constable sifted through the smaller crates, Poirot stepped just outside the shed, breathing in the cool air. His gaze moved to the railway line, faintly glimmering under the lamps, and then to the station clock above the platform. He studied its face for a long moment. "Time," Poirot murmured. "Always, it is time." He walked slowly toward Platform 3, inspecting the rails, the benches, and the lamp posts with a focused serenity. The fog swirled around him like a living thing. A train whistle cried in the distance. Inspector Garrow joined him. "What are you thinking?" "That Mr. Hartcombe lived his life by structure," Poirot replied. "By timetables, by precision. To break that pattern, it required something meaningful." He turned sharply. "Tell me, Inspector, was there anything unusual in Mr. Hartcombe's residence?" "A perfectly ordered home," Garrow said. "Like a museum with no dust. His valet keeps it immaculate." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And the letter he posted last evening?" Garrow blinked. "What letter?" "The telegraph clerk mentioned it." Poirot reminded him. "An urgent letter posted late at night. Finds such habits irregular for our victim, does he not?" "Where was the letter sent?" "The telegraph clerk did not say." "We must inquire." Poirot resumed walking. "Before that, however, I would like to see Mr. Hartcombe's regular carriage on the 8:15. Garrow stared. The crime was not on the train. "No," Poirot said gently, "but the pattern of a life is as important as the pattern of death. I should like to see where he sat every day." The inspector sighed, but gestured for a conductor to unlock the first-class carriage. Inside, the warm scent of polished leather and wood polish lingered. Poirot's steps were soft, deliberate. He paused before the fourth seat on the left, its upholstery slightly more worn, its small brass table gleaming. "This was his seat," Poirot said. "How can you know?" Garrow asked. "Observe the indentations," Poirot said, "and the faint outline of newspapers placed repeatedly in the same position. A man of habit leaves traces of those habits." He lowered himself into the seat, glancing around the compartment with the poise of someone reading a subtle and hidden script. "For 23 years, Poirot murmured. "Mr. Hartcombe sat here. He saw the same faces, the same conductors, the same scenery. What changed?" Garrow crossed his arms. "People die, Poirot. That's what changed." Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. "People die, yes. But people are murdered for reasons, and reasons do not appear from nowhere." He stood and moved to the window, looking out at the thickening fog. "One of these suspects lies to us, not out of panic, but out of purpose. I scented fear, guilt, secrets." He turned to Garrow. "A crime is like a puzzle, Inspector. Each person carries a piece. We must assemble them carefully." The inspector gestured weakly. "You make it sound so simple." Poirot smiled warmly. "It is never simple, but there is always order, even in chaos." A constable hurried up the platform. "Inspector, we found something behind the crates." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Ah, at last, the plot advances." The constable held out a small folded scrap of paper, smudged with dust but still legible. Garrow unfolded it slowly. His eyes widened. "What is it?" Poirot asked. Garrow swallowed. "A note. It reads, 'Meet me at dawn. Come alone. The truth cannot wait.' It's signed, Hartcombe." For a moment, the station seemed to fall into perfect stillness. Poirot exhaled softly. "So, he arranged to meet someone here. Someone he trusted. Someone who betrayed that trust." His gaze drifted toward the darkened corners of the station. "And so, Inspector," he said quietly, "our murderer did not lure Hartcombe. Hartcombe lured the murderer." Hercule Poirot preferred interviews conducted in quiet, orderly spaces, where the mind could hear itself think. Inspector Garrow, however, had little regard for such niceties, and so the station master's office, cluttered with maps, telegraph records, half-empty teacups, and a persistent smell of coal dust, became the temporary headquarters for interrogation. Poirot made no complaint, though he did discreetly realign a stack of timetables before taking his seat. "Let us begin," he said, folding his hands gently. "We shall invite them one by one, and we shall listen not only to what they say, but how they say it." Garrow nodded to a constable. "Send in Miss Wimbley." Miss Clara Wimbley entered with hurried steps and a notebook clutched to her chest. Her eyes flicked nervously between Poirot and Garrow. "I understand this is distressing," Poirot said kindly. "You were among the last to regularly see Mr. Hartcombe. Tell us, mademoiselle, what was your impression of him?" Clara swallowed. "He was steady, predictable, but kind, a quiet man." "And yet," Poirot observed, "your reaction this morning was one of profound shock. More shock than one might expect from a casual acquaintance." Clara hesitated. I suppose I admired him. His consistency, his discipline. In a world where everyone is rushing about, he was reassuring." Poirot leaned forward. "Did you know of any trouble in his life? Any concern he confided?" Her fingers tightened on the notebook. "No, except—" She hesitated. "Except last week, he received a letter on the train, a letter that troubled him." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Ah, describe it, if you please." "It came in a plain envelope. He read it twice. He seemed startled, almost frightened. He folded it very carefully and slipped it into his briefcase. Did he say anything? Only that he had matters to resolve. Nothing more. Poirot nodded slowly. Merci, mademoiselle. That is all for now. Clara paused at the door. Mr. Poirot, I hope you find who did this. He didn't deserve such an end. Poirot watched her leave, noting the tremor in her voice. Next came Rowan Pierce, the valet, who looked as though he had aged 10 years since morning. Monsieur Pierce, Poirot began, you knew the private habits of Mr. Hartcombe better than anyone. Was he troubled recently? The valet wrung his hands. Not troubled, sir, but thoughtful. He sat awake some nights, staring at his appointment book, as though calculating something. Calculating what? I do not know. But he was a man who noticed patterns. If something was out of place, even by a minute, he felt it. Poirot tilted his head. Was anything out of place yesterday? Yes, Pierce whispered. He returned home early, much earlier than usual. He said he had errands at the station, but when I inquired, he simply said, some things cannot wait. Garrow leaned in. Did he leave again later? Yes, shortly after 8. I assumed he was posting a letter, as he often did before bed. Did he mention meeting someone? No, sir, but when he returned... Pierce stopped. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Yes? When he returned, he looked relieved, yet uneasy, as though he had taken a step he could not undo. Poirot exchanged a glance with Garrow. Merci, Monsieur Pierce. Captain Henry Malden entered next, ramrod straight, chin set like granite. Poirot gestured to a chair. Please sit. I prefer to stand, Malden replied curtly. As you wish, Poirot said. Captain, you and Mr. Hartcombe had disagreements? Professional disagreements, Malden repeated. Nothing more. Poirot steepled his fingers. It has been suggested that these disagreements were heated. Malden's jaw tightened. He questioned my recommendations. He thought me reckless. I thought him overly cautious. It happens. And did you meet him last night? No. Poirot raised an eyebrow. You do not even ask at what hour. Malden's eyes flickered. Because I did not meet him at any hour. Where were you? At my club. There are witnesses. Poirot stood and walked a slow circle around the captain. One more question. Did Mr. Hartcombe owe you money? Or did you owe him? Malden stiffened. No. Poirot regarded him for a long moment. Very well. Mrs. Eloise Kent entered with a rustle of silk and a waft of expensive perfume. She carried herself with elegance, though tension darted behind her eyes. Madame, Poirot said with a gracious nod, you knew Mr. Hartcombe socially. Only in passing, she replied smoothly. And yet your perfume was detected at the crime scene. She stiffened. I was near the goods shed yesterday evening. I dropped a glove and went looking for it. Perhaps the scent lingered. Poirot lifted an eyebrow. And did you find this glove? No. Perhaps someone else picked it up. Poirot watched her carefully. Madame, were you acquainted with Mr. Hartcombe outside the train journeys? A pause. Barely a heartbeat, but noticeable. No, she said softly. Poirot's gaze did not waver. Très bien, you may wait outside. She rose quickly, her composure visibly strained. Mr. Tobias Ainsworth, timetable analyst, entered next, shuffling nervously. Mr. Ainsworth, Poirot began, you study patterns. Tell me, was Mr. Hartcombe's routine ever altered? Ainsworth blinked, once, 3 months ago. He took a later train, the 9:32. Poirot leaned forward. Why? I don't know, but I asked him about it the next day. I was writing a study on commuter consistency. He said something odd. Which was? Ainsworth swallowed. He said, even the most reliable clock can be disrupted by the wrong hand. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Très intéressant. Mrs. Agnes Whitlow entered with trembling steps. Madame, Poirot said gently, You knew Mr. Hartcombe for years. Yes, she whispered. He was a good man. Did he speak of the past to you? Of memories? Sometimes. Her eyes softened. He once told me he regretted only one thing in life, a promise broken long ago. Poirot leaned in. Did he say to whom this promise was made? No, but I always felt there was sorrow behind his punctuality, as though he were making up for something. Poirot nodded with deep thoughtfulness. Finally came Douglas Fry, the telegraph clerk. Mr. Fry, Poirot said, tell us about the letter Mr. Hartcombe posted. It was addressed to someone named A. Marwick, Fry said. He seemed anxious. He paid extra for urgent dispatch. Poirot exchanged a glance with Garrow. Do we know who this Marwick is? Fry shook his head. No. But Hartcombe wrote the letter in haste. He sealed it at my desk. Poirot leaned forward. Did you see what he wrote? No, but I saw one phrase before he folded the page. It read, I have discovered the truth. A heavy silence filled the room. Poirot stood slowly. Inspector, the timetable of murder grows clearer. He looked toward the window, where fog curled like smoke. And yet, one question remains unanswered. Garrow sighed. Which question is that? Poirot's eyes glittered. Who else knew that Lionel Hartcombe had discovered the truth? Detective stories often reach a moment when suspicion, like a compass needle shaken by an unseen magnet, swings sharply toward one person. For Inspector Garrow, that moment arrived sooner than expected. Hercule Poirot, however, knew that early answers were dangerous things, tempting, persuasive, and almost always false. Yet even he could not deny that the evidence appeared to tighten around one particular figure. It began with a knock on the station master's office door. A constable entered, holding a small leather glove with delicate stitching. Found this behind the crates, sir, he reported. Scent matches what Mr. Poirot detected earlier. Inspector Garrow raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Eloise Kent. Poirot made a small, thoughtful sound. Possibly. The constable added, There's more, sir. We found traces of this same perfume near the shed door. Very faint, but present. Garrow folded his arms triumphantly. Well, that's rather decisive, isn't it? Poirot said nothing. Mrs. Kent was summoned back into the office. She entered with a controlled elegance, but her eyes betrayed fear. Madame, Poirot began softly, we have found your glove. Her breath caught. I told you, I must have dropped it yesterday. But you did not mention dropping it near the crates, Garrow snapped. Nor did you mention being in the goods shed at all. Mrs. Kent's composure wavered. I was near the shed briefly. Only briefly. Poirot watched her closely. Why, madame? What reason had you to wander to such a place? She hesitated, a long, dangerously telling hesitation. It is embarrassing. Madame, Poirot said gently, we seek only the truth. Her shoulders slumped. Very well. I went there to meet someone. Who? Garrow demanded. She bit her lip. Lionel Hartcombe. The room stilled. Poirot bowed his head slightly, his eyes glinting with interest. Ah, at last, candor. Garrow leaned forward. And what business had you with Mr. Hartcombe? Mrs. Kent's voice trembled. He asked to speak privately. He claimed he had information that concerned me and my late husband. Poirot's expression softened. Madame, this information, was it of a delicate nature? Yes, she whispered, and that is why I did not speak of it earlier. It is difficult for a woman to admit matters of her family that might be misunderstood. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Continue, s'il vous plaît. He said he had come across something in his company dealings, something about my husband's investments, something fraudulent, but he would not elaborate. He asked me to meet him this morning so he could share the details privately. Poirot exchanged a quiet look with Garrow. And you agreed to this meeting? Yes. You came early. I arrived at dawn, she said. But I could not bring myself to go inside the goods shed. I feared what I might learn. I waited outside for a time, then left. Garrow pounced. So you lied about being there. I was ashamed, she said desperately. I did not kill him. Poirot raised a hand. Inspector, let us not rush. But Garrow was already in motion. A secret meeting, perfume at the scene, glove near the body, and a financial motive tied to the victim's discoveries. Mrs. Kent, you will come with us to the station for further questioning. Mrs. Kent froze. Please, you must believe me. I did not harm him. Poirot watched her closely. Her voice carried fear, yes, but also bewilderment. And something else. Truth. Garrow signaled a constable. Take her. The constable moved forward. Poirot suddenly stepped between them. Un moment. Garrow scowled. Poirot, the evidence is incomplete, Poirot said firmly. Garrow threw up his hands. You always say that. Poirot approached Mrs. Kent. Madame, one more question. When you arrived this morning, what time was it? A little after 5, she said shakily. The station was still locked. The porter opened it shortly after. Poirot nodded slowly. And you saw no one else? Only Edwin, the porter. He seemed half asleep. Poirot filed away the detail. Merci, madame, he said softly. For now, please remain nearby, but you will not be taken into custody. Garrow hissed. Poirot, she was meeting him. She lied about being near the shed. Poirot smiled gently. Inspector, motive, opportunity, and deceit alone do not make guilt. When the pieces fit too easily, one must suspect that the puzzle is not yet complete. Mrs. Kent was escorted outside, still trembling. Poirot remained in the office, gazing thoughtfully at the glove. Let us reason together, mon ami, he said softly to Garrow. Consider what we know. Garrow groaned. Here it comes. The lecture. Poirot ignored him. Mrs. Kent met with Hartcombe last night. She returned home. She arrived at dawn for a second meeting, but lost her nerve. She claims she never entered the shed. She's lying, Garrow insisted. Her perfume was there. Poirot nodded. Yes, her scent was present. But scent, Inspector, does not travel in straight lines. It lingers, it drifts, and it clings to those who brush against another. Garrow frowned. What are you implying? That someone else may have carried her scent. Impossible. Poirot shook his head. Not impossible. Common, a handshake, a hug, a borrowed scarf. Even standing closely can transfer a faint trace of perfume. Garrow blinked. But the glove? A glove can be planted, Poirot said simply. Dropped deliberately, or stolen and placed, or carried accidentally by someone who handled her belongings. Garrow stared at him. You think she's being framed? Poirot tapped his fingers together. I think, Inspector, that we have a convenient suspect. Too convenient. He lifted the glove again, turning it between his fingers like a delicate puzzle piece. And when a suspect appears too quickly, too neatly, eh bien, it is almost always a false lead. Garrow rubbed his temples. Then who? Who would frame her? Poirot smiled faintly. That, Inspector, is the correct question. He walked toward the window overlooking the fog-bound platform. It is not Mrs. Kent who interests me most, Poirot said quietly. Then who? Garrow demanded. Poirot's eyes narrowed to thoughtful slits. The one who opens the station at dawn. The one who found the body. The one who had every opportunity to plant perfume, glove or note. He turned sharply. Edwin Marsh, the porter. Garrow gasped. You can't be serious. Poirot nodded slowly. He's afraid, yes. But not merely from shock. No. He hides something. Something far more dangerous than Mrs. Kent's secrets. Poirot's voice lowered to a chilling calm. And I suspect, Inspector, that he knows exactly who Lionel Hartcombe intended to meet at dawn. Hercule Poirot believed that the human mind was the most revealing evidence in any case. A guilty conscience pulsed beneath the surface like a tremor before a storm. A frightened innocent, however, breathed differently. And so, while Inspector Garrow clamored for immediate arrests, Poirot prepared a different strategy entirely, one designed to prod, unsettle, and expose. The porter, Edwin Marsh, was summoned to the stationmaster's office. He entered hesitantly, cap in hand, face pale beneath the lamplight. His thin frame seemed almost to fold inward with anxiety. "Monsieur Marsh," Poirot began pleasantly, "please sit." Marsh perched on the edge of the chair as though expecting it to collapse. I told you everything already, sir. I swear it." Poirot gave a gentle smile. "And yet, when a man swears too much, sometimes it is merely to convince himself." Garrow rolled his eyes, but said nothing. Poirot clasped his hands. "You opened the station at dawn this morning, did you not?" "Yes, sir." "And when you opened it, was everything as usual?" Marsh blinked. "Yes, mostly. Except, well, the goods shed padlock was unlatched." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Unlatched? And you did not mention this earlier?" I thought I might have been mistaken. It was dim, foggy, and I was half asleep." "Yet you noticed enough to doubt. Why did you not tell the inspector?" Marsh's throat bobbed. "I didn't think it mattered." Poirot tilted his head. "Most curious. And tell me, did you see anyone near the shed at that hour?" Marsh hesitated. A fraction of a second, but enough. "No, sir." Poirot leaned back. "Monsieur Marsh, you are a poor liar." Garrow pounced. "Ah, now we're getting somewhere." Poirot lifted a calming hand. "Let us continue gently. Monsieur Marsh, I believe you saw someone near the shed, and I believe that someone frightened you." Marsh's eyes widened. "No, I swear—" Poirot leaned forward, voice soft as velvet. "Which would be more frightening, monsieur? Seeing the murderer, or being mistaken for him?" Marsh froze, gripping the edge of the chair. His mouth trembled. I'm not a murderer, sir. I never hurt anyone." Poirot nodded. "Then tell us the truth." Marsh's voice cracked. "I saw someone in the fog, a figure near the shed, but I couldn't make out who it was. They moved quickly, slipped away toward the telegraph offices." Garrow bolted upright. "The telegraph clerk?" Marsh shook his head. "No, sir, I'm not saying that. It was just the direction they went." Poirot asked calmly, "Why hide this earlier?" "Because," Marsh whispered, "because whoever it was, they saw me see them." A chill settled over the room. Poirot's voice was gentle. "So you were afraid?" "Yes, sir." Poirot rose and paced slowly, as though arranging invisible puzzle pieces. "Monsieur Marsh, when you discovered the body, you fainted?" The porter reddened. "Nearly, yes." "Nearly," Poirot repeated thoughtfully. "A curious thing. Most men react with shock to murder. But you reacted with terror." Marsh's eyes darted between Poirot and Garrow. What are you saying?" Poirot stopped walking. His voice softened with precision. "I'm saying that your fear was not of death, but of what the discovery would mean for you." "I didn't kill him," Marsh cried. Poirot raised a hand. "I do not say that you did, monsieur." Marsh blinked in confusion. Poirot stepped closer, voice lowered. "Tell me, did Lionel Hartcombe speak to you recently? Did he ask you questions about the station schedule, about who comes and goes?" Marsh swallowed hard. "Yes, a few days ago. He asked who opened the station earliest, who locked up at night, who stayed behind after the last train." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "And why would he ask such questions?" Marsh whispered. He said someone was following him." Garrow shot upright. "Following him? Why didn't you tell us this? Marsh sank into his chair. Because I didn't know if it was true. I thought he might have been mistaken. Poirot's mind raced. Might I ask what Mr. Hartcombe wanted to know specifically? Marsh wrung his hands. He asked if anyone had access to the timetables after hours, if anyone could change the posted train schedules without the public noticing. Garrow scoffed. Train schedules? Why would that matter? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, but it matters very much. To a man whose life is ruled by precision, even 1 minute out of place is catastrophic. He turned sharply. Monsieur Marsh, did Mr. Hartcombe seem frightened when he asked these questions? Yes, Marsh whispered. More than I've ever seen him. Poirot smiled gently. You've been very helpful. Marsh blinked. I have? Poirot nodded. Yes, you are dismissed. For now. The porter stumbled out of the room, visibly shaken. Inspector Garrow whirled on Poirot. Well, what do you make of that? Poirot tapped his fingers together. It confirms what I suspected. Which is that Hartcombe discovered something hidden in the timetable system, something someone desperately wanted kept secret. Poirot paused. And that someone knew he intended to reveal it this morning. Garrow paced. All right, but who? The telegraph clerk? The analyst? The captain? Mrs. Kent? The valet? Poirot smiled faintly. Patience, Inspector. Garrow groaned. More patience. Poirot, we have a terrified porter, a shady financial motive, a mysterious letter, and a dead man holding a train ticket. How does this fit together? Poirot walked to the fogged window, tracing a small circle on the glass. Consider the psychological state of our suspects, Inspector. Mrs. Kent hides shame, but not guilt. Captain Malden hides pride, but not intent. Miss Wimbley hides admiration, not hatred. The valet hides fear of disgrace, not murder. And the others? Poirot's voice dropped. 2 men hide something darker. Garrow leaned in. Which 2? Poirot turned slowly. The telegraph clerk, Douglas Fry, and the analyst, Tobias Ainsworth. Garrow blinked. Why them? Poirot gestured delicately. Because both deal in patterns. Both observe more than they admit. Both have access to communications and timetables, and both have the intellect to manipulate schedules without anyone noticing. He tapped his temples. And both, Inspector, are lying to us. Garrow sputtered. And how do you know that? Poirot's mustache lifted with satisfaction. Because when I asked each of them a simple question, did you notice anything unusual yesterday? Their pupils dilated not with confusion, but with calculation. Garrow stared. You're playing mind games. Poirot smiled. Exactement. He pressed a hand to his heart. And now the psychological game begins in earnest. We must unsettle them, push them from balance, so that guilt reveals itself. Garrow sighed. And how do you plan to do that? Poirot turned toward the door, eyes bright with strategy. By staging a very deliberate lie and watching who panics. The fog that had hovered over Wellingford Station all day thickened into a dense, eerie veil by evening. Lamps glowed like dull coins, their light swallowed before it reached more than a few paces. The trains ran behind schedule, causing restless footsteps, anxious muttering, and the echo of whistles that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was the perfect atmosphere for the next move in Hercule Poirot's quiet, psychological war. Inspector Garrow paced beside him on platform 3, muttering through clenched teeth. Explain to me again why we're about to tell 8 nervous suspects that we found the murder weapon when we haven't found a thing. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, mon ami, but that is the point. We do not need a murder weapon. We need only the reaction to one. Garrow shook his head. You're playing chess while the rest of us are playing checkers. Poirot twirled the end of his mustache. A flattering comparison. Now let us begin. Suspects were gathered once more in the waiting room. The atmosphere was brittle, like glass strained under pressure. Each person entered with a flurry of anxious glances. Miss Wimbley clutching her notebook, Captain Maldon stiff as a bayonet, Mrs. Kent pale and trembling, Tobias Ainsworth twitching as though he'd been set alight, Douglas Fry polishing his spectacles with trembling fingers, Mrs. Whitlow wringing her floral handkerchief, Rowan Pierce hunched like a man awaiting doom, and Edwin Marsh avoiding everyone's eyes. Poirot stepped into the room with the grace of a man taking his place on a theatre stage. Inspector Garrow followed, chest puffed with official authority. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, "we thank you for your cooperation. New evidence has been uncovered, very significant evidence." Several people inhaled sharply. Poirot continued smoothly, "The murder weapon has been found." A collective ripple of shock ran through the room. Garrow added in a booming voice, "A blunt instrument bearing traces of Mr. Hartcombe's blood and fingerprints, clear ones." Every head snapped toward him. Poirot watched faces, not reactions, fear, puzzlement, alarm, panic, shock, but two reactions stood out distinctly. Tobias Ainsworth blanched white, gripping the back of a chair so hard his knuckles trembled. Douglas Fry's spectacles slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. Two men, two flinches, each too quick, too instinctive, too genuine. Poirot studied them silently. The psychological game had begun to reveal its victims. Inspector Garrow strode forward. "We will be taking voluntary statements again, one by one." Poirot added gently, "But first, a small announcement." He folded his hands. "The fingerprints on the weapon belong to someone in this room." Gasps erupted. "And," Poirot continued softly, "we shall know who's within the hour." If fear had texture, the room was now lined with it. Garrow barked, "Ainsworth, you first." Tobias Ainsworth's lips parted as though to protest, but no words emerged. He stumbled forward. Poirot raised a hand. "No, Inspector, we will begin with Monsieur Fry." Douglas Fry jumped as though struck. "Me?" "Yes, monsieur," Poirot said with mild warmth. "You will come with me." The telegraph office was dim, lit only by the yellow glow of a single desk lamp. Papers were stacked neatly, wires stretched along the walls, and the faint scent of ink lingered. Fry stood rigidly in the doorway. Poirot gestured to the small wooden chair by the desk. "Please sit." Fry obeyed stiffly, his shoulders quivering. Poirot began with disarming softness. "Monsieur Fry, you dropped your spectacles earlier. Was that because the news startled you?" "Yes," Fry whispered. "Or," Poirot added calmly, "because you feared the weapon may bear your fingerprints." Fry's breath hitched. "No, I would never harm Mr. Hartcombe." Poirot nodded mildly. "Then explain something to me. Why did Mr. Hartcombe write to A. Marwick? You saw the letter. You saw the words. I have discovered the truth." "What truth, monsieur?" Fry hesitated just a moment too long. Poirot's eyes sharpened. "You know." Fry's hands shook violently. Mr. Poirot, I'm just a clerk. I deliver letters. I don't interfere." "But you read them," Poirot said softly. "You read all of them." Fry's face drained of color. Poirot leaned in. "Mr. Fry, you tamper with telegraphs. You alter messages. You monitor communications. This is your secret." "That's not a crime," Fry stammered. "It is," Poirot said calmly. "It is a federal offense." Fry collapsed into silence. Poirot pressed gently, "Did you alter Mr. Hartcombe's telegraphs?" Fry shook his head frantically. "No, never. I only read them. For curiosity, sir. Harmless curiosity." Poirot studied him. "And what did you read?" Fry hesitated, then whispered, "Hartcombe wrote to someone often. A Marwick. He said someone was manipulating the train schedules. He believed money was being moved discreetly by changing travel times. Delays, early arrivals. Minutes adjusted. Poirot's breath paused a beat. "Go on," he whispered. He believed someone was using the railway for illegal financial exchanges, Fry said, trembling, and he found proof last week. Poirot's mind clicked sharply. "And you told someone?" Fry looked ill. I didn't mean to, but I was frightened. If criminal dealings were happening, I wanted protection." Poirot's voice lowered dangerously. "Whom did you tell?" Fry squeezed his eyes shut. "Tobias Ainsworth." The revelation hit like a thunderclap. Poirot stood slowly. "You did well to tell the truth," he said quietly, "but you have placed yourself in considerable danger." Fry stared at him, horrified. "Danger? But I didn't do anything." Poirot looked out the window into the dense fog that wrapped the station in silence. "Sometimes, monsieur," he said softly, "knowledge is the most dangerous thing in the world." A sudden shout echoed from the platform. Poirot and Fry rushed out of the telegraph office as Garrow and several constables ran toward the goods shed. Lanterns swung wildly, footsteps thundered. Poirot arrived just as Garrow burst through the shed door. Inside, Tobias Ainsworth lay crumpled on the floor unconscious, blood streaming from a wound on his head. A lantern rolled beside him, flickering violently. A collective gasp swept through the gathered constables. Garrow swore. "Someone attacked him. He's alive, but barely." Poirot knelt beside the injured analyst, studying the wound. "This," Poirot murmured, "is no accident. Someone feared what Monsieur Ainsworth was about to reveal." Garrow spun around. "Who attacked him?" Poirot rose slowly, expression grave. "The murderer," he said softly. "Our murderer has struck again." He closed his eyes for one chilling moment of reflection. "And now, Inspector, the timetable of deceit advances?" The goods shed had become a battlefield of shadows and frantic voices. Constables knelt over Tobias Ainsworth, pressing a cloth to his wound. Garrow barked orders, lanterns swayed, and the fog curled inward like a living creature drawn to chaos. Hercule Poirot alone stood completely still. His eyes were not on the injured man, nor the blood, nor the lantern skittering on its side. His gaze rested instead on a small patch of dust just inside the shed door, where a faint trail of disturbance caught the light at a perfect, revealing angle. A single footprint. Not large. Not belonging to Ainsworth. Not belonging to Hartcombe. And not belonging to any of the officers now present. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Inspector," he called softly. Garrow turned, flushed and irritated. "What is it now, Poirot? In case you haven't noticed, we have an attempted murder." "Yes," Poirot murmured, stepping carefully around Ainsworth and kneeling beside the faint print. "And the attempted murderer has left us a calling card." Garrow blinked. "A footprint in dust. The whole station is dust." Poirot smiled thinly. "But not all dust is equal, mon ami. Observe." He pointed delicately. "You see how the footprint overlaps the dust from the earlier crates? That dust was disturbed when Monsieur Ainsworth was attacked, or shortly before. And this print, it is on top of that disturbance." Garrow frowned. "Which means that the attacker left this footprint mere moments ago." Poirot's voice dropped to a whisper. "And, importantly, it is the footprint of someone who re-entered the scene after the attack." Garrow's eyebrows shot up. "Re-entered? Why return?" Poirot stood, his expression thoughtful. "Perhaps to retrieve something, perhaps to hide something, or perhaps to ensure Ainsworth would truly remain silent." Garrow swallowed. "But the killer fled when we arrived." "Not necessarily," Poirot said. "What do you mean?" Poirot turned toward the platform where the suspects waited under guard, scattered in anxious knots. "Inspector, the murderer may be standing before us even now." Ainsworth was carried to the station infirmary. A doctor was summoned. Poirot requested each suspect remain within sight of a constable while he and Garrow returned to the stationmaster's office. Once the door closed behind them, Garrow exhaled sharply. "Poirot, your hidden clues better start adding up. We have 2 attacks, no weapon, a disappearing attacker, and 8 people who all look terribly guilty and terribly innocent at the same time." Poirot straightened a pen on the cluttered desk. "Permit me to list a few things that do not add up, Inspector." Garrow grumbled. "Here comes the list." Poirot began, ticking delicate fingers. 1. Mr. Hartcombe arranged a meeting at dawn, but told no one whom he was meeting. 2. He had discovered something about the train schedules, something fraudulent. 3. He wrote to A. Marwick, claiming he had discovered the truth. 4. The telegraph clerk, Monsieur Fry, admitted reading Hartcombe's confidential correspondence. 5. Monsieur Ainsworth, the timetable analyst, knew the inner workings of the rail system more intimately than anyone. Garrow cut in. Yes, but he's attacked, nearly killed. Surely he isn't the murderer." Poirot tapped his temple. Perhaps. Or perhaps the attack was staged. Garrow stiffened. "You think he knocked himself unconscious?" Poirot shook his head. "No, the blow was real. But do not underestimate desperation, Inspector." Garrow groaned. "Poirot, you're stretching." Poirot ignored him, continuing his list. 6. Mrs. Kent's glove was found behind the crates, too obviously placed. 7. Monsieur Marsh, the porter, saw someone near the shed at dawn, near the telegraph offices. And 8. Poirot paused, eyes gleaming. 8. Mr. Hartcombe's unused train ticket. Garrow scoffed. "We've been over that." Poirot shook his head. "But you did not ask the right question." Garrow threw up his hands. "Which is?" Poirot leaned in, lowering his voice. "Why was he holding it?" Garrow blinked. "Because he never got to use it." "No, Inspector. A man being struck from behind drops things. Loses control of his hands. The fingers splay, the grip loosens." Poirot folded his hands, the gesture precise. For Mr. Hartcombe to die while still holding the ticket, he had to have been holding it before he fell, which means he was prepared to show it. He expected someone he trusted to meet him, someone he wished to convince he was simply catching his usual train. Garrow stared. So the killer was someone he feared, but needed to reassure. "Exactement," Poirot whispered. Poirot spent the next hour moving about the station with uncanny focus. He inspected benches, lampposts, door handles, the telegraph office, the timetable board, and even the discarded newspapers left from the morning rush. At one point, he paused before the large timetable board, the mechanical kind which clicked softly as the letters changed. He studied it for a very long time. Finally, he ran a gloved finger across the bottom edge. Dust. Too much dust. Garrow stepped beside him. "What now?" Poirot leaned close to the board. "Notice, Inspector. The dust is uneven. Someone has opened this panel recently." Garrow's jaw dropped. Why would anyone open the timetable board? Poirot's eyes glittered. To change something. He stepped back, surveying the station with quiet intensity. "Inspector, Mr. Hartcombe discovered someone manipulating the train system. A clever manipulation, to move money or people unnoticed. Someone with both access and intellect. Someone who could alter telegraphs, adjust schedules, and hide discrepancies." Garrow swallowed. "Fry or Ainsworth? Or someone working with one of them," Poirot added. Then, very softly, "And Mr. Hartcombe confronted that person last night." Garrow frowned. "Who did he confront?" Poirot smiled faintly. "That, Inspector, is what I now know." Garrow blinked. "You know the killer?" Poirot nodded, slow and solemn. "Yes, a small clue revealed everything." Garrow sputtered. "What clue?" Poirot adjusted his cuffs, a detail so small, so simple, that only a man obsessed with order would notice it. He turned away. That is why the murderer tried to kill Ainsworth, because Ainsworth knew too much, because he knew Mr. Hartcombe had discovered the discrepancy. Garrow shook his head. Poirot? What discrepancy? Poirot stepped toward the window overlooking the fog-filled platforms. Time, Inspector. Minutes, seconds. A schedule altered by the smallest adjustment. He turned his head. And someone feared Mr. Hartcombe would reveal it. Garrow stared. Poirot, what are you planning? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Summon everyone to the main hall, close the station, lock the doors. It is time for the final gathering. He paused. And bring the timetable board key. The fog outside had thickened into a swirling grey shroud by the time the station hall was cleared and prepared for Hercule Poirot's grand assembly. Oil lamps flickered along the walls, casting trembling shadows across the polished tiles. The large mechanical timetable board loomed overhead, silent, still, waiting. Constables stood guard at every exit. The suspects were arranged in a semicircle. Miss Clara Wimbley clutching her notebook like armor. Captain Maldon rigid and simmering with contained frustration. Mrs. Kent pale and fearful, eyes darting. Rowan Pierce wringing his hands. Mrs. Whitlow trembling slightly. Edwin Marsh shifting nervously. Douglas Fry swallowing hard. And finally, Tobias Ainsworth, pale but conscious, bandaged head supported by a chair, demanded brought by Poirot despite the doctor's protests. Poirot entered the hall with serene composure, adjusting a small imperfection in his pocket square before stepping into the center. Mesdames et messieurs, he began softly, thank you for your presence. The moment has arrived to reveal the pattern, the intricate timetable, behind the murder of Monsieur Lionel Hartcombe. Everyone stiffened. Poirot folded his hands. A man who never missed his train for 23 years, a man whose punctuality was more than habit. It was identity, and yet he was killed at dawn, holding an unused ticket. Why? Because he was investigating a crime of precision, a crime rooted in time itself. Gasps rippled in the room. Inspector Garrow stepped forward. Poirot, you said you discovered the fatal discrepancy. Poirot nodded gracefully. Indeed, and now I shall share it. But first, allow me to reconstruct the events. He turned to the group, eyes glinting. Last week, Mr. Hartcombe discovered small anomalies in the train schedules. Minutes added, minutes subtracted. Early arrivals, delays that were too consistent to be accidents. He began pacing gently. These tiny adjustments allowed someone to move illegal funds and secret passengers without detection, exploiting confusion in arrivals and departures. And who could manipulate such things? His gaze swept the room. One with access to telegraphs, one with access to timetables, one with specialized knowledge of patterns. Fry swallowed. Ainsworth winced. Poirot continued. But Hartcombe knew, and he wrote to A. Marwick, his old friend and accountant, warning him, I have discovered the truth. But before he could send proof, the murderer intervened. He paused, turning to the mechanical timetable board behind him. Everything hinges on this. Inspector Garrow stepped forward, holding the key Poirot had requested. Ready when you are. Poirot nodded and motioned for him to unlock the front panel of the timetable board. As Garrow swung the panel open, revealing a network of gears, letter tiles, and delicate mechanisms, the suspects leaned forward. Poirot stepped to the mechanism, brushing aside dust. Someone opened this recently. The dust line is uneven, the screws have fresh marks, and more importantly, he pointed to a small metal lever inside. This lever controls the minute adjustments between timetable displays. It has been altered. Gasps echoed. Poirot continued. Ainsworth knew the timetables intimately. Fry handled telegraphs, but it was neither of them alone who altered this board. The true criminal needed access. Not to communications, not to theoretical knowledge, but to this physical mechanism. He turned slowly. Who here would have such access? Every gaze drifted to the same person. Edwin Marsh, the porter, keeper of keys, opener of the station, guardian of the mechanical systems. Marsh stumbled back. No, I swear. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, monsieur. You are not the architect of the scheme. No, you are merely the assistant, the accomplice. Marsh froze. Poirot continued softly. You opened the station early for someone. You gave them access to the shed. You adjusted timetables at their request. And finally, you led Mr. Hartcombe to his death, perhaps unwillingly, perhaps under pressure. Marsh's eyes flooded with panic. I didn't want to. I never meant... Mrs. Whitlow gasped. Mrs. Kent pressed a hand to her lips. Clara Wimbley trembled. Poirot went on. Monsieur Marsh assisted. But he did not plan. He did not invent the scheme. He did not have the intelligence or the strategic mind to manipulate schedules with such precision. Poirot turned his head with deliberate slowness. The mastermind is someone else entirely. Eyes darted to Fry. He shook violently. No, I only read the letters. To Ainsworth. He groaned weakly, clutching his bandaged head. Poirot's voice grew calm, firm. The mastermind is the one who understood patterns, not in theory, but in practice. A mind obsessed with details, with time, with punctuality. A terrible silence filled the hall. Poirot's eyes locked on Rowan Pierce, Hartcombe's valet. The room gasped as one. Pierce's face drained of color. Poirot stepped closer, voice quiet but devastating. Yes, you, Monsieur Pierce. You knew every minute of Hartcombe's schedule. You handled his papers, his accounts, his letters. You intercepted correspondence meant for A. Marwick. You knew the financial scheme endangering your employer. You were silencing him piece by piece. Pierce shook his head violently. This is madness. Poirot continued. You were the only one who knew Hartcombe's exact movements, who could lure him with a plausible excuse, who could plant the glove, who could force Marsh to cooperate through threats, and who could slip into the goods shed unnoticed to strike Ainsworth, because you knew the constable patrol patterns. Pierce's breath quickened. No, I... Poirot lifted the unused ticket. And you knew Hartcombe would bring this. His symbol of routine, his promise of normalcy. He trusted you, Rowan Pierce. And you killed him. Pierce's trembling became violent. Stop! Stop! Poirot stepped even closer, voice low and merciless. He discovered the truth, that the financial irregularities in the accounts of the firm Captain Maldon advised were not Maldon's work, but yours. You stole funds and hid them by manipulating train schedules. And when Hartcombe uncovered the crime, you silenced him. Pierce's knees buckled. And then, Poirot went on, you attacked Ainsworth, who had begun to suspect when he analyzed the altered schedules. You tried to kill him as well, but you failed. Pierce staggered forward, choking on breath and fear. Poirot said quietly, It is over, monsieur. Silence held the room. Then Rowan Pierce collapsed to his knees. I didn't mean to kill him, he cried. I only meant to frighten him, to stop him. But he fell before I could stop. Garrow barked, Constables, take him. As Pierce was seized, the remaining suspect stood frozen, stunned into silence. Poirot exhaled softly, his shoulders relaxing. The pattern is complete. The echoes of Rowan Pierce's confession still hung in the air like the last toll of a distant bell. Constables escorted him away, his sobs muffled by the station hall's high ceiling and the thickening fog pressing against the windows. The other suspects remained frozen where they stood, each one absorbing the sudden collapse of tension, the shattering of false suspicions, the rearrangement of guilt. Inspector Garrow exhaled a long, exhausted breath. Well, that's that. Case closed. He rubbed his hands together as if brushing off dust. But for the record, Poirot, I still don't understand half of what just happened." Poirot merely smiled. He stepped forward into the center of the semicircle, addressing not the inspector but the group, those who had been trapped for hours in fear and uncertainty. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began softly, "allow me to explain the full pattern now that all pieces lie face up." He turned toward Mrs. Kent first, who clasped her hands together in relief. "Madame Kent, you are innocent. Your meeting with Mr. Hartcombe was driven by fear of financial scandal. But you neither killed the gentleman nor aided his death. The perfume, the glove, these were used to mislead us. Pierce planted them after overhearing your conversation with Hartcombe last night. He intended to paint you as the jealous, desperate suspect, should the need arise." Mrs. Kent pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shimmering with tears. I feared that very thing." Poirot nodded kindly. "Your fear, madame, was precisely what he exploited." He shifted to Captain Maldon. "And you, mon capitaine, you quarreled over investments, but your pride, though formidable, was not murderous. Your alibi at the club is sound. Monsieur Pierce simply hoped suspicion might fall upon you long enough to obstruct the investigation." Maldon scowled, but there was relief behind the sternness. Next, Poirot faced Miss Clara Wimbley. "You admired our victim, mademoiselle, but admiration is not motive. Your only secret was embarrassment over your affection. That is no crime." Clara flushed, clutching her notebook tighter. Poirot continued. "Mrs. Whitlow, you mourned a good man. Your grief was sincere. You played no role beyond kindness." The seamstress nodded, trembling slightly. Poirot turned to Douglas Fry. "Monsieur Fry, your curiosity is, how shall we say, excessive. Tampering with private telegraphs is illegal, yes, but you did not kill. You stumbled upon information large enough to frighten you, information that you foolishly shared with Tobias Ainsworth." Fry lowered his head. "I never imagined it could lead to this." Poirot nodded. "Curiosity can be dangerous, monsieur, but not criminal. Not in this case." Finally, his gaze moved to Tobias Ainsworth, who sat pale but alert, the bandage stark against his temple. "And you, Monsieur Ainsworth, suffered for your knowledge. You pieced together mathematical anomalies, delays too consistent to be mistakes. You were close to the truth, close enough that Pierce believed you must be silenced." Ainsworth swallowed. "I never expected violence." Poirot bowed slightly. "Few do." Inspector Garrow stepped closer, his voice booming across the hall. "Fine. But what I still don't get is why Pierce did it. What was he gaining from manipulating the train system?" Poirot clasped his hands lightly. "Ah, Inspector, allow me to illuminate." He paced toward the open timetable board. Pierce discovered that by adding or subtracting minutes from specific arrivals and departures, he could create discrepancies in financial deliveries, parcel movements, securities transfers, and the exchange of documents that banks often transported via locked courier trains. A murmur swept through the room. Poirot continued. He opened parcels not meant for him. He diverted others. Small thefts, perhaps at first. Later, larger manipulations. With the aid, voluntary or coerced, we will determine, of Edwin Marsh, who held the keys and opened the station early. Marsh, trembling in his corner, whispered hoarsely. He threatened me. He said he'd blame me for everything. I was terrified. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Fear makes accomplices of many who might otherwise remain innocent. You will explain your part to the authorities, but remember, you did not kill Hartcombe. Marsh visibly sagged, half from relief, half from despair. Poirot resumed pacing. Pierce relied on precision, a habit he learned from Hartcombe himself, whose routines he studied intimately. But precision works both ways. Hartcombe noticed what others did not. Discrepancies. Minutes gone astray. Early trains. late trains, patterns invisible to the eye of most men. Poirot lifted a hand, and so Hartcombe confronted Pierce last night, quietly, with dignity. But Pierce panicked. He struck him, in the shed, where they had agreed to meet at dawn to discuss matters best not overheard. Poirot paused, letting the gravity settle. Hartcombe died instantly. Panic grew. Pierce attempted to arrange the scene, plant evidence, manipulate the arrival of others. Later, fearing Ainsworth suspected the truth, he attempted a second murder, but the psychological game revealed him. Inspector Garrow nodded slowly, absorbing each piece. But what about the hidden clue? The one you said solved everything? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, yes. The tiny detail overlooked, the catalyst of clarity. Look, Inspector. Look at the ticket. He lifted Hartcombe's unused train ticket once more. Do you see the timestamp? The conductor punched it yesterday, but Hartcombe always purchased his ticket in the morning, never the day before. That was his routine, his sacred routine. So why did he buy it early? Poirot's voice softened. Because he knew he would not return home. A ripple of shock spread. Hartcombe purchased the ticket earlier, so as not to alert Pierce. He feared Pierce was watching his morning routine. A deviation might warn the villain. So he bought the ticket before he confronted Pierce, to pretend this dawn meeting was just another morning. Poirot placed the ticket down gently, and that, Inspector, told me all. Hartcombe feared his killer, and he took precautions. Garrow's voice softened. He tried to protect himself. Poirot nodded gravely. Yes, but he underestimated the man he trusted most. Constables led Rowan Pierce through the hall again, now in irons. He paused, eyes hollow. Poirot met his gaze without triumph or cruelty. You could have chosen honesty, monsieur. Instead, you chose the manipulation of time, a dangerous path. Pierce looked away. As the doors closed behind him, silence settled. Poirot turned to the remaining suspects. You are free to go, mes amis. One by one they departed, some shaken, some relieved, some wiser. Finally, Inspector Garrow approached Poirot. Well, Poirot, another mystery solved. You're a marvel. Poirot smiled modestly. It is the little grey cells, Inspector. They require only order. He picked up his hat and cane. And now, if you permit, I must catch my own train, unlike Monsieur Hartcombe's murderer. I never miss one. Garrow chuckled. Safe travels, Poirot. Poirot tipped his hat. Merci, Inspector. May your days run as smoothly as your timetables. He stepped into the fog, disappearing with immaculate composure. Another case closed, another truth revealed, another train not missed.